And I think that's a broader communication thing, right? I also think as people in the influencer marketing space, we have to remember, and I try to remember this myself, not everybody understands this the way that we understand it, right? We live this, we breathe this, but there are people out there who still don't understand the point of influencer marketing, who don't see a value in it, right? Or who maybe see that value differently than you do.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. I've been having a little bit of an existential crisis when it comes to this podcast, and I wasn't sure whether or not I should just be honest about that and like share that with you guys of all people, because you listen to this show and theoretically you enjoy what it is. But okay, I'm going to do that. I'm going to be honest with you guys, and I don't know. I would love to hear your thoughts. So basically, I've been doing this podcast, I think, since 2018. The community launched in 2017, and the podcast, I think, was 1 year later, which is pretty insane to think. We have I think we're approaching 300 episodes. And for the past couple years, maybe even longer than that, I've been doing the most consistent. This has been one of the most consistent things in my whole life, to be completely honest, recording episodes every single week. It's a long time, and I'm not someone that necessarily does things that consistently. My ADHD self would it's unnatural for me. I bring all that up because I have been wanting to do more personal episodes. I certainly have recorded a few this year in particular, and I just get so much out of that. I want for us as women to remove stigmas on things. I want to have really important conversations, and sure, those conversations occasionally can revolve around influencer marketing, but sometimes they don't. Sometimes it's about what I shared in a few episodes ago about fertility issues. Sometimes it's about the relationships that we're in, or the good things in life that have to do with our pets and literally have nothing to do with influencer marketing. So I'm having a little bit of an existential crisis because, and I'm so dramatic right now, it's not that deep, but I've been contemplating starting a whole new podcast and having it not be about influencer marketing, having it not be about anything other than just sort of the timely topic of the week and what's on my mind, and just having some deeper conversations. And I don't know if anyone would listen to it. I'm just being real candid with you guys. I think that's a fear of mine. I mean, obviously, right? I'd put it out there and everyone's like, no, we just keep doing what you've been doing, Jess. Keep talking about influencer marketing. That's what we come to you for, and the other stuff's fine, but no, we're good. And I guess I'd always take that risk. That's the risk that I would take, and it could turn out in either direction. I guess that's not a reason not to do it. I'm just talking out loud with you guys. I'm curious, do these just any solo episodes that I've done, would you be curious? Would you be interested? Would you actually listen to a podcast that it was just more of that? I feel so vulnerable asking this question, but it's a real question and I don't have the answer to it. Only you guys do. So it's something that's been on my mind. I would love to hear your thoughts. I love when you guys reach out to me. And during the personal episodes that I've shared, that's when the most of you have reached out to me. And I love that. And I love being able to facilitate these really impactful, deeper, destigmatizing types of conversations around some pretty taboo topics. That's one of my favorite things to do. And I just wonder if I bring that to this podcast, if that would make any sense. I've done it a couple times because I basically couldn't help myself. And thank you to you guys who have been receptive to it. But the reality is, I look at our numbers, and while I got a lot of reach outs about some of those personal episodes, they weren't our most listened to. So I think I would want to, and not want to, I think I would need to keep them separate. And I would love to hear from you guys if that's something that you'd be interested in. I would love to have a co-host. I would love not to just do this show myself. I would love to talk like the Almost 30 podcast. I don't know if you guys know that one. It's a really good one. They're well into their 30s now. That's how long it's been on the air. But, it's like two women and they just have this great banter. And sometimes they do solo episodes, but most of the time it's two of them. And I don't know, I got to find my co-host. So it's just something that's been on my mind. So I wanted to share with you guys, and we'll see what comes of it. I don't know. But there is a desire there. And with that desire, that was definitely infused in today's conversation. Because again, I couldn't freaking help myself. I'm like that person. So yes, this is an interview episode, but it's with a good friend of mine, someone that I've respected, someone who I look up to, I admire. I love her energy, her passion. And we've been friendly now for probably 10 years, which is really crazy to think about. I remember getting breakfast with her in LA when she worked at Style Hall. I probably worked for the talent agency Buchwald's that I used to work at. I definitely did not have my own agency yet. And I liked her so much back then. And so many years later, I'm like, God, I still like you so much. She just has such a great vibe. I know you're going to enjoy listening to her. The woman I'm referring to, is Steph Martin, and she works for an incredible tech company. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about her background, and then we're going to dive into this episode. And you're going to hear also in her own words. We talk about so much stuff on this episode, guys. We talk about AI, which we talk about AI. I won't even get into it now. Listen to the episode. There's so much to talk about for that. We talk about, starting a brand marketing program from the ground up. We talk about taboo and difficult categories to talk about in influencer marketing. What do I do if I'm trying to get influencers to talk about a underwear brand or a bra brand? How do I get influencers to post in their bra if maybe they've never posted that type of content online before? How do I get them to talk about sexual health or hair loss or IBS products? There's some challenging products out there. What do you do? We talk about empowering women in the workplace and how to advocate for yourself and what to do when things aren't necessarily going your way. And we also talk about influencer rates and negotiating tactics and communication styles. And we had such good topics today, such good conversation. I just finished recording, so I can vouch. Is a really good one. And we really get into it. We go there and we talk about personal stuff too. So anyways, it's a great episode. A little bit about Steph before we dive in. She's a brand marketing leader with an expertise in influencers, partnerships, and brand strategy. Her decade of experience spans industries with an integrated approach to talent, media, and entertainment and brand partnerships. She began her career on the agency side, activating influencer campaigns for brands like Walmart, Sephora, Warner Brothers, and Verizon before transitioning to in-house roles at ThirdLove and at Hims and Hers to establish their brand marketing programs. Her specialties include building brand activation strategies and leveraging partnerships to grow emerging companies into beloved household names. She's at a tech company now. So you can see she has really worked in so many different sectors, from agency to in-house. She's really got an incredible amount of experience, and she shares that with us today. I'm so excited for you guys to connect with her. And she's one of our mentors as part of WIM. I'm a fangirl. I feel like I'm fangirling, but it's because I am. I adore her. Without further ado, introducing Steph Martin. This show is sponsored by Women in Influencer Marketing, better known as WIM, the best online community for the creator economy. You will meet fellow influencer marketers. You'll meet brands. You'll meet talent agencies to talk shop, get hired, and even find a mentor. When you become a member, do not forget to check out all of our incredible resources. For example, we have dozens of masterclasses from the top voices at TikTok, at YouTube, award-winning agencies, and women who are paving the way for us all. So if you want the chance to network with a who's who in influencer marketing, check out what it takes to become a member. Make more money and have fun doing it. Visit iamwim.com/join. That's iamwim.com/join today. And I so look forward to seeing you more around the community. All right. We are officially recording. So, I mean, I don't know. We're just sitting here talking about like our knockoff Stanleys and our love of Amazon. That's like honestly what we should just do this entire episode about is our love of Amazon.
The best Amazon buys.
Yeah, right? Like countdown. Do you watch like Amazon roundups? Like, do you follow like Amazon influencers and stuff who share things that they recommend on there?
So I used to, and I found it to be too dangerous and too tempting for me. And so actually, it's funny. I had this conversation with a couple of my colleagues where we were talking about what are like the money habits that we want to personally change in our own lives going into 2024, the end of last year. And I said, less DoorDash and less impulsive Amazon buys. So for my own sanity, I actually ended up unfollowing all of those people that were encouraging me to buy things that I probably didn't need. They were cool and fun, but that was the end of my Amazon influencer following.
Because they're so tempting and some of the stuff on there is so good. It almost feels like gambling or something or like a little shopping addiction. Yeah, we were talking about, I mean, they have clothes on there, like gadgets, little home stuff. And the thing is like some of the prices on there are so like trivial that you're like, oh, whatever. It's like an $8 thing, but like they add up.
It does 100%. So you got to be careful. That's one thing that I'm trying to really be more mindful of this year is less impulsive purchases overall.
And so like you're between LA and San Francisco, right? Like what percentage of your time are you in each city?
Most of the time in the Bay Area, every once in a while in LA.
Okay. I was thinking because so I've been to LA more times than San Francisco, but I've been to San Francisco maybe like twice my whole life.
Oh, no way. Okay.
Only twice. And I loved it. And I have heard, correct me if I'm wrong, that like there are there's like a little bit of a crime problem right now. And I bring that up just because like I've been seeing that here in New York as well. And so like when we're like going to make this whole episode about Amazon packages. When we get Amazon deliveries, I have to like legit run downstairs because it's like a thing that people will follow the Amazon trucks. They make their delivery and then they just literally steal people's packages. Are you seeing that in San Francisco? Because I heard that.
I believe it. I haven't personally seen it, but I do believe it. And I'm also someone who's very quick to pick up a package once it's dropped off. There's like a gate, a lot of people have gates. A lot of people have like secured package areas, but even then it's definitely dicey. And I believe that people would definitely follow an Amazon truck, unfortunately, especially around the holidays or, times when they know package deliveries are up. So it's a bummer. You got to be careful.
I swear though, like the couple times that I've gotten something taken, it's like the dumbest stuff. It's like never like the cost of something significant. It's always like it's just not an expensive item, but like something that you needed, like that was pretty timely. And you're like, this one's the one that you took. Why would you do that? I do think that like from a brand's perspective, I imagine that like that must be like a logistical nightmare because like who's eating the cost of that? I think the truth is that the customers end up eating the cost of it only because the brands probably have to just raise the prices of the items to make up for like the lost merchandise when Amazon inevitably is just like, of course, we'll just send you a new one. Like that cost comes from somewhere,
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm sure it's coming from multiple places, but yes, it's always like the things that are just inconvenient. So like I had laundry detergent taken once, right? Where it was the very last, I was like down to the last drop. I needed to do some laundry. I Amazon Prime that detergent. I was like, okay, I need to wash all my clothes. And that was the package that got stolen. It was like soap and laundry detergent.
But that's I don't get it. But that's the stuff that when you go to like a Walgreens or something, that's always been like locked up or with like a security tag on it. In New York, it's insane. We're going on such a tangent right now, but like in New York, you will see now, like today, if you go into Manhattan, you'll see like you'll go to a Walgreens and in front of the Walgreens, there's literally stuff being sold like bootleg that they literally stole from inside and they're selling it outside.
I believe that's wild.
It's insane. And I just like, there is a connection to this, like to, a broader like marketing or brand, conversation because like these costs get passed on. And like, I just imagine like from a brand's perspective, like, how do you deal with that? This is such a hypothetical question, but like, I do wonder, what you do about that if you're on the brand side to combat that. Anyways, I have a bunch of like really interesting topics that I want to get into. So I'm going to stop talking your ear off about shoplifting in New York and San Francisco. Although I don't know, who knows, maybe we'll circle back. But anyways, I'm so excited to have you on. I feel like it's like a long time overdue. And you've been part of WIM for so long. And like even more than WIM, like we've just partnered on stuff like and known each other like for years now. So we heard a little bit about your background in the intro of the episode, like in my words and like on paper. But I always like to hear from your perspective, like tell us a little bit about your like career path, your journey, because you've been with such really cool companies over the years as well, and a brief synopsis in your own words of how you got to where you are today.
All right. I love this question because it wasn't planned. And I think a lot of people maybe try to over-engineer their careers, right? It's very strategic, as you should be. But there's also there's something to be said for serendipity or things that just kind of fall into place because they're meant to be. And that's what happened to me in terms of influencer marketing. So I've been in the industry about 10 years now. Prior to that, I started off in PR, and it was my first job out of college. And we started to have clients ask us about bloggers. Now, this was again pre-influencer marketing. So, more than 10 years ago at this point. And our clients were like, oh, well, can we send, at the time, our client was like some authors and they had books and book publications. Can we send our books, specifically children's books? Can we send our books to bloggers, like mommy bloggers that were kind of bubbling up back in the day? And so we tested that out, got some coverage. And then we had other clients start to ask about that, even in other industries. This was not just fashion and beauty, but like other types of industries too. Although I had some fashion and beauty clients, we sent sandals to a couple bloggers. Okay, surprise, they posted it and it was actually working. It was driving traffic. And so this became more and more of a need at this boutique PR agency I was working at. And at the time, prior to working on this, I was working on more traditional PR and media things like pitches and press releases and coordinating events, right? And eventually they said, hey, you're a young person at this company. This is a new thing, figure it out. And so I started to do that, right, for our clients. And eventually I realized that I loved it and I felt like there was something there. And so I decided I wanted to find a place that was doing this more because I realized I couldn't do it on my own. Truthfully, it was such a new industry. I didn't 100% know what I was doing, right?
None of us
I was
did.
also very new in my own personal career at the time. And so I ended up getting a job at an agency that is no longer around called Style Hall, which is how I ended up meeting you, Jesse. And I started off building these brand programs for clients. And a lot of the time, again, going back to the industry being so new, some of the programs we were building were the first ever influencer programs these major brands had built, right? Brands like CoverGirl and Sephora Collection, their in-house line, brands like Procter and Gamble and Braun, and like a lot of these were very early Walmart, very early influencer programs. And so we were just testing and learning. And I'm really happy that I went agency side, even though, again, it was just kind of something that I started doing and fell into, but I'm happy that I chose to pursue it in the agency side first, because it gave me such a breadth of knowledge in a time when the industry was coming up that I got to see not only how one client or one brand was doing it, but how the host of all of these different brands were deploying different strategies, trying new things out, hosting events, sending packages, but also, booking brand campaigns across YouTube and Instagram at the time. This was even pre-Instagram stories, right? Like, how are those posts performing before Instagram fully supported video content, like Reels, the way it does today? So even just being there from the beginning and getting to see how these brands were building some of their first ever influencer programs was great. And I loved it. I got to meet a lot of amazing talent managers. I got to meet a lot of amazing creators and amazing brands. But one of the things that I felt like was missing is I would build these relationships with creators and they would come to me and say, I have this awesome idea. I know you contracted me for this campaign with X brand, but I heard you guys are working with Y brand. And I had this idea I want to pitch to them. And of course, we could go pitch that to our clients. But being that we were the agency, we were really only contracted for a certain scope of work. So maybe we weren't contracted to be pitching for that specific product that creator wanted to work on, or we weren't contracted to be pitching for that upcoming release that was happening. We were really only scoped for very specific work streams. And my thought around that was like, hey, wait a minute, I want to be able to help bring this to life. Like, I know these creators, these are actually great ideas that I think can drive value based on what I've seen across all of these other brands. But I felt like my hands were tied in a lot of ways because I wasn't the decision maker. So I said in my next role, I want to go be the brand and I want to make those choices about how we work with creators. I want to be somebody who can build those relationships and listen to those ideas and actually act on some of these things that creators are pitching that I think are legitimately good ideas. So that's what I did. I moved to San Francisco. I got a job at a women's bra and underwear company called ThirdLove, built their first ever influencer program from the ground up, built that out, worked across a multitude of functions on mostly the brand side, but also very much growth side too. How do we actually use influencers to drive effective and efficient growth at the company, especially in the D2C world? Hopped on over to Hims and Hers, built that program out, and now currently in the tech world and have built out another program. So it's really just been something that, happened, I think, supernaturally. It wasn't planned, especially when I think of myself at this PR firm 10 years ago and influencer marketing didn't exist. Like this whole thing started because I was sending product to bloggers and it was a case of right place, right time and an interest to take on something new. And I loved being part of something that at the time, we all used to joke was like the Wild West. And it was. And I think in a lot of ways it still is compared to traditional media. But I loved being able to be a part of something where we were all building and learning and growing together. And everything was new. And there was constantly new development, new tech, new things we should be aware of in the industry. So it's been great. And that's how we got to be here.
And there still is like a newness, but nothing beats those early days, like the excitement of it. And like everything was literally so new. And it was like exciting and it was promising. I don't know. I literally just wrote a post like earlier today about how like that's sort of why I got into it in the first place.
Yep.
And transparently, I almost like thought we kind of would have been like a little bit further along in like our innovation, like 10, 15 years later.
Yeah.
And like on a certain level, I think that like, okay, like, well, something matures and the level of innovation, like it makes sense that it would slow a little bit, but like, I wish it didn't. I'm curious that you're talking about how like progression of your career, it certainly wasn't necessarily like, all right, I'm going to go from here to there. And it's like very strategic. But I wonder, like, so that was your path before. Do you feel like anything's changed now that you're about like 10 years into your career? Do you feel like you're a little bit more strategic now? Or how do you feel about that?
Definitely. I also think that, influencer marketing in the way that in my experience and the way that I've been able to go through it with my own career has actually given me a ton of exposure to so many different aspects of in-house marketing teams and businesses. So I've sat on growth teams, I've sat on brand teams, PR teams, but not only that, I've also sat on social teams and worked cross-functionally with lifecycle marketing teams, integrated marketing teams, and really got exposure to so many different parts of the business. And I think for me, one, yes, definitely more mindful now than I was 10 years ago about where I'm going and the type of work that I want to work on, but also thinking about how can I use all of that amazing experience that I have that's just beyond influencer marketing, which people think of as its own category because it's not, and build something holistic that encompasses all of those different things. And I think when we talk about the next frontier, that's what influencer marketing is in the next frontier. It's not, you just have an influencer team in the corner and they send packages out as gifting, or it's not, you pay a few influencers to talk about your brand. It's how do you make that partnership work for you across all of these different functions to lift your company overall, right? How do you strategically use influencers for growth and brand? How do you build a brand with influencers that also drives efficient and organic company growth over time? So you're actually not having to put as money into your paid and it lowers your CACs overall. How can you use it to boost your life cycle and engage your existing members or users or customers? So I think that's the next frontier actually is it's no longer just a siloed thing that people are doing on the side, which is what it was, right? I think 10 years ago. Now it's how do you integrate it throughout the full funnel of your marketing and your brand?
Yeah, 100%. And I think that it's like so smart to think of it like that. And I feel like perhaps it could be like a little overwhelming for people to say like, oh my God, now we got to like overhaul what perhaps we've built for, decades or has existed for decades, whether it's an advertising arm or a marketing arm. And the answer is like, well, you don't have to do it. You don't have to do
Yeah.
anything. But like, it probably would benefit you if everybody's talking to each other. And there's so many like synergistic opportunities if like there's opportunities between them. So I'm curious though. So like, I mean, you said a few times now, like you've started a brand marketing program like from the ground up, which I think is a very unique experience to have had. Many people are plugged in after the fact. I'm curious, like, having been through it a few times, like what are some of your major takeaways and which strategies would you implement the next time around knowing what you know?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, a couple of things come to mind. When you're building a brand overall, you have to think about the bigger message and what you stand for. Because just saying we're a brand and we believe in X is one thing, but you need to have a solid core set of brand values that you truly believe in that flow through everything that you do. So, that's on the brand side. When it comes to influencer, I think it's also important to understand, how does influencer fit in within this business? How do you want to use it? Because to our earlier conversation, right? You can use it for any of those things. You can use it for acquisition. You can use it for brand. You can use it for PR. You can, there's a million ways to use influencer. But I think as somebody who comes in and is the builder and the leader of this program, you have to sit there and think about what is the most strategic and efficient way that we can use influencers to power our business. And maybe it's growth, maybe it's brand, maybe it's both. But I would also think through, what does the business need right now? So a very early age startup, you're focused on, efficient marketing. You're focused on acquisition marketing because you don't have a ton of funding maybe to build brand. For the long term, you need to get people in and you need to do it efficiently in the beginning, right? That's just the reality of being an early stage company. However, you also maybe you're thinking about what's the long-term goal for building the brand. So yes, we need influencers who are efficient now, but what do these people say when they endorse our brand? And what does that mean for us as we build our brand over time? So those are some of the things that I think I've learned. I think moving forward, one of the things that I would implement sooner, and I have implemented, but I would implement sooner, is I would really get an understanding from the leadership and the executive team about where they see the company going and what the needs are that they need addressed. Because the truth is, you could build the best brand marketing program in the entire world. But if the leadership team is like, we have to focus on really efficient, customer acquisition costs right now, and there's no appetite for brand, you're going to have an uphill battle. So I also think it's really about listening and understanding what the appetite is for certain types of programming across the company.
And like communicating with key people who like are either going to be your biggest advocate or maybe perhaps you're one of your biggest roadblocks. Because I like, we talk about this in terms of like influencers, even like I see a synergy there being like, they can create the greatest content in the world, but if they're getting, 2 likes and no one's seeing it, is it even worth it?
Yeah.
And so if you're sitting there grinding away, creating the best influencer program, but like you don't have the full support or it's not supporting the main timely pillars of that company, you just might be stunted. So I think that's like really interesting advice. Sometimes I swear, like it's like the simple like way of thinking about it, or like it sounds fairly simplistic, but like so many people don't think about that. So I really appreciate you bringing that up. I'm curious, like also we've talked about like taboo topics on this show before. And I don't know, you said you worked for ThirdLove, certainly isn't taboo, but like there could be influencers that perhaps aren't comfortable taking photos in a bra and underwear, right? There's other categories, of course, in terms of like sexual health, like hair loss, like, so, like cannabis is a big thing now. I don't know if you have experience in that, but just things that I've seen broadly. But I'm curious, like from your perspective, how can influencers and marketers leverage creative brand strategies to tackle those taboo or like difficult categories?
Yeah, it's a great question. So first you have to have a great brand strategy. And what I mean by that is if you're approaching somebody about a topic that may be taboo or uncomfortable, one of the things you can do to help potentially this talent that you want to work with understand where you're coming from is convey your brand messaging, right? So at ThirdLove at the time, right, I would go email. This is very early days when I think a lot of people were maybe more uncomfortable posing, right, in a bra and underwear. I would email creators and say, hey, here's what we're about. Here's our mission. This is what we're looking for. We do need you to pose. We realized pretty early on that like a flat lay wasn't working for us, right? That just, it wasn't showing how the product actually fit, especially in the case of a brand like ThirdLove that offers such a unique and wide variety of sizes and fits and things like that. Flat lay just isn't going to showcase the full, scope of the product. And so we would email people and I would get responses back like, don't ever email me again, you creep. I'm not going to post in my underwear.
Damn.
I mean, and you can imagine, right, that I received similar responses for talking about hair loss, acne, especially sexual wellness, right? Definitely received a lot of that. But the way that you combat it is tying your brand, especially if you're in a taboo or, a little bit of a less sexy space, right? Is you combat that by tying it to a broader brand message. So for ThirdLove, it was about empowering women, right? And being a leader and being an example and actually showing that like, this is underwear that fits you and makes you feel comfortable and confident. Not, hey, we're trying to be a creep and ask you to pose in your underwear. It's about a bigger message. And I think the same thing when you think about other stigmatized industries, right? It's let's have these conversations to destigmatize them. It's bigger than just, I'm trying to ask you to post about something that's uncomfortable. Like, especially in the case of sexual wellness, this is something that maybe many people are facing issues with. People maybe feel uncomfortable. They don't know who to trust. They don't know who to talk about it with. I think there's so many examples of that where it's really about making it bigger than just the post, right? You're doing this post with the intention of talking about a bigger, more meaningful brand message. That's one piece. The second piece is when it comes to the brand strategy, you have to build that trust, because there's one thing if it's a brand that people have never heard of, then they're definitely going to think you're a creep, right? Or if they go to your website and they don't see content on your website that reflects the messaging you're trying to tell them to support, it doesn't make sense and they're going to be spooked. And I think that's really true for new brands or startups. Like if you say, I'm all about empowering X group, right? Or I'm all about destigmatizing this thing, then the rest of your brand, the way you present yourself on social, the way you present yourself on your website, if you have a physical product, the way that the physical product looks and how it's merchandised, all of those things have to match so that if a creator comes and sees that message and says, okay, I'll bite, right? Let me take a look at this. They understand that you mean what you say and you're putting your money where your mouth is. So I think that's the other part of it too, right? You can't just say, I want to be a brand that stands for this thing. And especially if you're in a taboo category, I would like for you to post about it. The creator is going to be like, well, I've never heard of you. I don't see this message anywhere reflected in the rest of your marketing. This makes me uncomfortable. No, thank you. And that's something that you're also going to have to build over time. And I think that's the other piece too, right? Of course, I got rejected a million times with creators saying, don't ever email me again, go away. I'm sure I ended up, blocked many times. But you also keep going until you find your people. And this is where the messaging comes in. You find the people who align with your brand's messaging and truly believe in those shared values. And you lead with your values. You lead with that bigger brand message. And so it has to be pulled through your entire marketing funnel. It has to be everywhere and visible so people believe you. But that's eventually how you find the right creators who are not only going to make the most authentic content for your brand, but they're going to do something that maybe is a little bit outside of your comfort zone because they believe in the message. And so when people ask me about, how do you market these products that, how do you get influencers to talk about these products that are maybe taboo or uncomfortable? That's how you do it. You have to have a solid brand that stands behind it. And you have to make sure that they're bought in to the message and not just to the ask at surface level.
I mean, I have so much to say about that, but I guess like surface level, that's one of the things I love about social media. And I hope to see more of is like destigmatizing some conversations about all sorts of stuff. So I feel like as influencer marketers, it can probably be one of the most rewarding things to do if that's something that you also value, which is like we could get women more comfortable talking about being in their own skin or empowerment, or, we could talk about like sexual wellness and just like lose the stigma around it. There's so many like of these taboo topics, even like health issues too. Like, gosh, I've seen content on like, or like brand partnerships on like, IBS or, just like some health issues that like people feel ashamed about or like, uncomfortable with. And it's like, I hate that for those people, right? Like, I don't want them to feel like that. And I feel, and like, there is such an opportunity to combat that, or at least to improve it with influencers. And so I feel like almost if you're in one of those topics, the products that you have are in one of those more sensitive, delicate topics, like you should probably really lean into influencers, because having like a real human being tell their personal story and really humanize the use of this XYZ product, like that can really go such a long way. So I don't know. Like, go get a job at like a sexual wellness company now. Like, go get a job at like, selling some like lingerie, like whatever you're passionate about. I'm joking a little bit, but obviously, like, there's a really good opportunity there. I feel like if that is something that you're passionate about, that like you can legitimately like make a difference. And I feel like, I don't know, that's something that's important to me at least. Quick question for you guys. How much do you love redlining agreements? Yeah, me too. Let me tell you about our latest sponsor called Caveat. So Caveat with a K is an AI-powered contracting platform that simplifies and automates your contracts. It'll hugely improve the way that you review partnership agreements. So if you're a media company or an entertainment company or a management firm, it's a must-have tool. Look, sometimes you do need to hire a lawyer, an expensive lawyer nonetheless, to work on an agreement because it's over a certain threshold, and a good lawyer can be invaluable. But what about all those other partnerships, those other contracts that are for $5,000 or even like $1,000? That's where Caveat comes in to support you and your team through AI to process your contracts to gain a competitive edge through data-driven insights and automatic AI-driven red lines. It's game-changing tech, and it's founded by 3 brilliant women. So you know why I'm out here supporting it. Get time back in your day, because Caveat will help you with the part of your business that may be your least favorite. So head to our website. It's iamwim.com/caveat for a completely free trial. That's iamwim.com/KAVEAT. I hope you guys love it as much as I do. So similarly, though, we've talked a lot about pricing. It's come up so much this year, certainly last year as well. It's like it's always been a topic of conversation. And I feel like, okay, so like in the scenario that you shared earlier, like, so you do a lot of due diligence to find influencers that are even comfortable posting content about them in a bra, let's say, in underwear, right? Perhaps they charge a premium for that though, right? Because it might be a little risky for them. It's certainly not like the most like PC content. Like they might get some comments that they didn't appreciate, what have you. There's a little bit of risk involved there. So like hiking up a price slightly for that reason, like I can justify that. Like I can understand that. But I'm seeing things where like the prices just literally make no sense to me for what influencers are charging or managers are charging on behalf of the influencers. So I'm curious from your perspective, like just what have you been seeing in terms of pricing, and what advice would you give based on all that you've seen to the influencers and to the managers to improve their negotiations?
So I love this question and I want to get into this. But before I do, I want to touch on something that you just shared in your comment prior. Influencers, especially in traditionally stigmatized industries, are everything, literally everything, because they contextualize your product or service in an everyday scenario for someone. And that personal story, that storytelling is truthful and authentic. And it's one thing if you're a brand to say, again, we believe in this, or this is our message, or we're trying to destigmatize hair loss, whatever it is, right? And it's a whole other thing to have somebody come and say, I experienced postpartum hair loss after I had my second daughter, and this is what happened. And these are all the things I tried first. And then I found this product. Like, those two things are night and day, right? And so you need those creator voices because they have the reach and they have the visibility, but they also have the storytelling. And I think it goes back to figuring out how you want to use influencers in your strategy overall, but you have to let them tell those stories, right? I think a lot of brands will sometimes be like, you tell your story, but also we want you to say these 17 talking points over here, or they'll give you a specific blurb to say as a creator. And you miss out on the authenticity, which is somebody telling their personal point of view, their personal relationship to this product, this service, this experience, right? That ultimately helps destigmatize the industry or the product or the category overall. So you need that personal connection to actually understand how the product can make a difference for you. Because then you start to visualize, oh, hey, this person had postpartum hair loss. This person had this experience. This person didn't feel comfortable in their own skin. This person could never find a certain type of undergarment that fit them. Those are things that I've had too, right? And it just brings that humanness, that human connection to it. And I always say, like, we as a brand, you can talk about how great you are all day long, but when someone else talks about how great the product is, that's a whole different ballgame. So anyway, just want to say you hit the nail on the head.
Well, you did too. So thank you for elaborating on that. I appreciate it. You want to get into
Yes, let's talk all things pricing.
Yeah.
Pricing is all over the board, right? I think especially in more stigmatized industries or very popular industries, it makes sense that there would be a premium on that, right? Especially if you're asking somebody to do something outside of their comfort zone. Of course, there's going to be a premium that's expected, but how much of a premium? That's the real question. And I have also personally seen, right, some rates that just don't make any sense. And so there's a couple ways to think about it. One, my advice to creators or agents or managers is know the results. Like, are you actually driving results? Because if you're asking for $20,000 for a TikTok, for example, but you're not getting consistent views, you're not driving consistent actions, that doesn't make any sense, right? The value and the rate has to be equivalent to the results. And I think a lot of times that's something that people forget about. I think especially agents or creators, it's easier to say that this creator is worth X. And we should, by the way, be paying creators fairly and appropriately. I am 100% aligned for that. But at the end of the day, we also have to be realistic and know that this is a business transaction in a lot of ways. And this is a business decision for a business to invest in a partnership with a creator. The same way it's a decision for a creator to align themselves with that brand, right? These are business decisions on both sides. And we have to make a reasonable business decision here that's rooted in facts and rooted in results instead of rooted in, I feel like this should be my rate. And I do feel like I'm seeing a lot of rates that just don't check out from a factual standpoint in terms of driving those results. And I will say, I think it used to be a lot more clear in the days of YouTube because you could kind of back out into, okay, this person's been getting X amount of views. Maybe historically they have this click-through rate when they have a link in their description box, like going back to the way olden days, right? It was a lot more predictable. TikTok is fickle, right? The algorithm is fickle. You don't know how it's going to perform. But I also think that needs to be factored in too, right? It's a big bet for a brand to put a lot of money into paying a creator for a video that, even though it's amazing, might not get the views. And so even if the video is great, if it doesn't get views, is that effective marketing for the brand? Is that going to deliver ROI? Is that going to deliver the business results that the brand is looking for? If it gets 10 views, probably not, right? It's a sunk cost. So I think you can be predictive in a lot of different ways. There's obviously tools and tech, and you can ask questions of how things have performed historically. There's always that element of risk as well. That's how it is, I think, with influencer marketing. But I also think that brands and agencies and creators, I think everyone has to come to the table with an understanding of what the facts are in terms of pricing, right? How many views are you actually driving? What are your results historically? And then, yes, there's all these other factors, of course, usage, exclusivity, all of these things, of course, those factor into the price. But there also has to be some level of, we think that this is worth this amount. Here's why.
And I think that it's a matter also of just like of having an open dialogue also with the
Yes.
other side, like whoever you're negotiating with, because I can imagine like from a brand's perspective, it could be refreshing to hear, a manager say, well, like this is sort of what we've done historically. But I think that like this is a topic that their audience like particularly responds to well, and like and just providing more context around it and maybe asking a few more questions to say like, well, what is your specific goal here? Because especially if you're a manager, you're usually representing a few different influencers, and so like perhaps you reach out about one person and the assumption is like, well, they must know everything about that one influencer if they're specifically reaching out to them. But what if you actually have an influencer on your roster that might be better suited for that brand partnership simply based on what they're looking to achieve? But you'll never know that unless you ask. And most brands aren't going to like in the first email say like, okay, we're looking to get this, we're looking to get that. Maybe they should. I mean, it would just be helpful, I think, from all sides to just like over communicate more. So that's really interesting. And I think that like, it's interesting to hear, like, it sounds like you're seeing just rates that are a bit higher, like when they're presented to you, a rate that seems a bit high. What's the tone? Like, is it take it or leave it? Is it like, this is just my rate, there's no negotiation? Or is it like, this is typical, but let me know your thoughts? What are you seeing most often? Or is it like a little bit of everything?
It's a little bit of everything, right? It depends on the agent. It depends on the creator, if they're self-managed, how they respond to these types of inquiries. So it's all over the board, how you respond, right? I think in the industry, the good faith approach that most people take is let's have a conversation. But there's also people who walk away, right? And there's also brands who say, this number is so far outside of what we have budgeted. There's no way that we're going to be able to make a respectful deal here. So for example, the brand has $1,000 and they just got quoted $50,000 for the scope of work from the creator. The brand may say, we have goals to meet, we need to move on. And I've seen that happen too. Or the creator may say, this is not even worth my time. This is my rate. I know you, if you're offering me $1,000, but I need $50,000, I'm not going to be able to make this work. And I think that's okay too, as long as it's handled respectfully. I do think that there should be more conversation though around the goals. And Jessie, I'm so happy you bring that up because this is actually my favorite thing creators do. And there's one creator in particular, I'm going to shout her out because I haven't worked with her in a long time, but she's so awesome. Her name was Cara. I think her last name is Harms or Hams. She was Whimsy Soul for a while on Instagram. And one of the things that I love that she used to do was every time I would email her for a campaign, I don't know if she's self-managed anymore. At the time she used to be self-managed, she would email me back and say, here's what I'm thinking, but before I can price myself accurately, I'd love to know your goals for this program. Can you tell me what your goals are? Can you tell me what your KPIs are? Can you tell me some more context about the program, what you're trying to achieve, what else is happening during that time? She used to ask just such good questions as a creator. And on the brand side, I loved it because we used to have these conversations where I'd email her back and say, we're looking to drive views or site traffic or purchases of this item. And so she would know how to craft her content to meet those goals. And I think more creators, more brands, more agents should be having some of those more candid conversations around what the goals and the KPIs are so everyone can know what success looks like. Because I agree, I think a lot of the times it's a black box, right? And maybe everyone's trying to operate in good faith, but if no one knows what the goals are, how can they try to do their best to meet that goal if they don't know what they are? So,
or if one person knows and they're not
sharing. Yeah, like, right.
What is that all about? Right. No, I love that so much. I think, I mean, I'll speak personally. I think because I come from the management side of things, I've never been on the brand side. I know a lot of managers worry, like they approach it like, oh, I don't want to ask too many questions, or they must be so busy. Like if I ask like all these questions, they're going to be like, oh, like on to the next, like go to the easier person. But you're telling us the exact opposite, that you had a positive reaction when somebody asked you questions, right?
Yeah, especially if it was related to the goals. And I think, again, it's all about how you frame it. So if you frame it as, hey, this creator is super excited about this program. We want to make sure that we're meeting your goals. Can you help us understand what are your KPIs? I'm excited to receive that email because that means that you actually care about how this is going to perform. And you're not just here to have this be a transactional relationship where we pay you for a post and you make your post, you don't care how it does and you're out, right? That means you actually care. And so for me on the brand side, I always appreciate those emails because I think there's an element of thoughtfulness to it that shows you're genuinely interested in having this be successful and not just getting paid and moving on.
I love that. And so like, what if you're asked these questions, you give them an answer based on like, we're looking to achieve X, Y, Z. And what if they come back to you and they're like, okay, so if that's what you're looking to achieve, I would recommend being on a different, like producing content, maybe not on TikTok, but on YouTube instead. Cause I think based on what you told me that like, I would be able to produce those results better on another platform. Do you have that flexibility, or is that like, that's really good to know, that probably won't work for this campaign because we're really targeting TikTok, but I will make a note, flag it, and come back to you in the future? How do you handle that?
So it depends, right? I've actually been in several situations where this has happened, and we've pivoted the deliverables based on what the creator tells us is going to perform, right? So if they're like, actually, I think I can drive more sales on YouTube than I can on TikTok, or I think I can drive more views on TikTok than I can on Instagram Reels because I'm currently seeing my videos do well when I put them in this style, right? Maybe we ask for a get ready with me, but they think that they can do it a lot better if they do a sit down, film in their car video and not a get ready with me. So I've had flexibility. I also haven't, right? Sometimes there are specific needs that need to be met. And of course, there are things that are confidential that we can't always share with creators. So for example, maybe we need content that is on Instagram so that we can syndicate it somewhere else. And of course, we would be very clear about the usage, but maybe there's other things going on behind the scenes that we're not able to share, or like we have to activate on a certain platform for a certain reason. But sometimes there is flexibility. So I don't think it ever hurts to ask the question. And you could also say, if you're a creator or a manager, right? I see your goals are this. I know this creator is going to perform better on this platform. Is that something you'd be open to? Or would you be willing to see if there's flexibility on the deliverables? Like, I don't ever think it hurts to ask the question. And I really believe that most people want to have a genuine connection. And at the end of the day, they want the best results for their program, right? So if you're telling them they're not going to get great results the way it's set up now with this creator, but you do think they can get great results if you set it up a little differently, I think most brands would be open to it. But again, sometimes there isn't the flexibility. It just depends.
So I will say this. I can imagine a lot of people listening or watching this on YouTube, like, are hearing your answer and being like, oh, that will like lifts a weight off my shoulders. Like, that's great to hear. That's great feedback, and makes me feel like I can have more of an open dialogue. I think like my hesitation is that like not everybody on the other side is you. And I obviously mean that as a compliment to you, right? Like, not everybody on the other side either like has the openness that you do, or has the authority even perhaps that you do, right? Like, sometimes it's just a junior level person that you're speaking with who's just following a directive, and they're like, no, like, or they're trying to manage this huge influencer partnership at scale where they're literally speaking to thousands of people, and they're like, I just can't make the time for this. So I appreciate what you're saying. And I think like you might as well try, because hopefully you will reach someone on the other side who's like you. But I don't want people to be discouraged if they don't, because not everyone you speak with is going to be a Steph Martin. You know what I mean?
I understand. And I've been there too, right? I've also managed campaigns where I've had like personally manage hundreds of influencers, and like my inbox is just exploding. You don't have time to have some of these personal negotiations. It just depends. But I would say try. The other thing that I would also, I don't know, maybe challenge you or challenge anyone listening to think about is, if you know you're not going to perform for this campaign, why would you sign up for it? Because that's just going to damage your relationship with the brand. If you know in your heart of hearts that they're looking to drive sales, for example, right? That this is a very performance-based company. They just said their goal is that they need immediate return on investment. Like, and you know that's maybe not the way that your audience responds, especially if they ask for something like an in-feed Instagram picture, and you know that from an image you're not going to be able to drive those results. Why would you also want to sign yourself up for something where you're not going to perform well? Because now maybe next time that brand goes to approach you, they're going to say, she didn't perform well last time, right? But maybe it's because it wasn't set up correctly. So that's another thing. If you know that you can't meet the goals of a program, I would also consider being more discernful in how you partner with brands, and maybe having that conversation that this isn't the right setup for me, but I think I can drive amazing results for you here. And again, some people will be receptive, some people won't. But I also think from a talent perspective, like if I was a creator, I also wouldn't want to set myself up for a program where I know I'm not going to be able to meet their goals. The brand's going to be upset. Like, that's not a great relationship for the creator either.
But that also takes like making decisions out of a place of like empowerment.
It does.
And
It does.
because, right, if you're making decisions out of fear, being like, oh my God, this economy is rough and this person wants to pay me a couple $1,000s and I have to make my rent, like, they might say yes. But so I understand why some people would agree to things when they're like, I don't think I can do this. But I encourage them to hear what you're saying, because I think that thinking more long term is just, and thinking from this like empowered sort of just like this abundance mindset is absolutely a stronger position to run your business, any business,
Yep.
versus making decisions based on fear and insecurity. So I love that you're saying that. And I think like I kind of want to I want to pivot a little bit to talk about like us as folks who work in the creator economy, right? So like talking about creators feeling empowered, or talking about managers feeling empowered to have these open conversations. And I feel like we like throw around that term, like it's like the word like authentic.
Yes.
Like, does it almost perhaps lose its meaning a little bit? But it is such an important word. So we're gonna like bring the meaning back today, you and I. So
Okay, let's bring it back.
we're bringing it
You,
back.
me, and our Amazon knockoff families.
Yes. We've gone from an Amazon conversation to bringing back the word, empowering the word empowered. We're turning it around here. So my question is for you is like, at work, you've worked at some really cool companies. You've also worked at from agencies to also like brand work and a couple things in between. When have you felt, I like to get real on this podcast, so I'll preface this question with that. When have you felt disempowered at work in a role that you've been in? And like truly, really, like how did you get through that?
Yeah. I wouldn't say it's necessarily a specific role, but I think I have felt the most disempowered when I haven't been heard or understood. And I think that's a broader communication thing, right? I also think as people in the influencer marketing space, we have to remember, and I try to remember this myself, not everybody understands this the way that we understand it, right? We live this, we breathe this, but there are people out there who still don't understand the point of influencer marketing, who don't see a value in it, right? Or who maybe see that value differently than you do. And that's actually why I brought up earlier, like, align with your leadership team on what do they value, right? And set up a program that matches that. Because I think the situations where I have felt the most unempowered, right, are ones where I haven't been heard, or there's just an overall misalignment in terms of strategy and communication. I would also say, like, how did I get through that? Well, I've worked really hard on listening and being a better listener to help figure out how to navigate these situations. I've also helped myself, I think, by learning some different communication tactics. So there's a few I'm going to share because I actually think that they're helpful, and I hope they help people out here listening. One thing is like knowing what triggers certain people who you work with in your work environment, right? So I worked with someone once who I realized was really like triggered by the word but. So this person, if you would say, we're working on this program, but we encountered some issues, right? This person would read that as, well, you're not really working on it because you said you have all these issues, or you're making excuses, or whatever that is. And what I realized was, how can I be more mindful in my communication? So I started not using the word but, and instead saying, we're working on this project, and also we need to connect with legal on a few issues. And I started replacing but with and also. And I noticed that it made a huge difference in the way that this person perceived that information.
That is so cool. Did they have the self-awareness though to know that? Like, did they tell you?
No.
Or you were just like, I feel like they might be triggered by this. I'm going to try something different. So this was you.
This was me. I realized in listening to their conversation, and this is why I say I always work on being a better listener, because I realized in seeing how they interacted with other folks or other departments, right, that when other people did that too, they had the same reaction. Like if they heard but, it was in their mind like, oh, you're not working on this, or you're not trying hard enough, or you don't care enough about this, or whatever they were thinking. I'm not in their brain. But I noticed that it elicited a negative reaction. So I started trying that instead. And I noticed I got a lot further with that. There's another one that I heard from a book a long time ago, almost like an audiobook, like an old audiobook that my mom listened to like 20 years ago, but I still remember it. And the tip was, I am not saying this, I am saying this. And when you feel like you're being misunderstood, I'm not saying that we can't activate this campaign in May. I am saying we need more resources to do it. We can't also do this campaign on this product and this one at the same time. And that helps disarm that conversation a little bit. So I love to find those tips. I also encourage people, like there's a lot of folks on TikTok who share tips like this. I personally love to watch those types of TikToks about communication. They help in your personal life, but also in the workspace. And I think when I have felt the most disempowered are those times that I'm not being heard. And you can't fix everything, but I do think that you can start by being a better listener and sometimes changing your communication style to help work through challenges. Like that one change, changing from but to and also, immediately made me more heard by this person immediately. And so I stopped using the word but. I just started saying, and also we have to think about this, or also we're doing this thing.
That's so good. But I like, it's interesting because I feel like so many people could easily fall into the trap of like, I'm not heard. So I'm going to do the opposite. You lean into that so much. You're like, I'm not being heard. So I'm going to listen more to you. I feel like people would shut down. A lot of people would turn away and be like, I'm not being heard. Then like, F you, I don't want to talk to you anymore. So I think that it's cool to hear that you also have had the result that you've had. And I love stuff like that. I love that there's like a side, of course, there's a side of TikTok that talks about, communication skills.
Yeah. I'll have to send you some after this. There's some good accounts. I can't remember any off the top of my head, but I'll send you some. I think the other piece too is to your point, like it is so easy to say, I'm not being heard. And I also think that it's nuanced, right? In certain circumstances, right? Maybe you love everything about your job, but you're faced with this one challenge, or you love everything about this project you're working on, but you're feeling misunderstood or unheard in this capacity. Like there's also different layers and nuances to it too, right? If someone's just terrible to you all the time, that's completely different than feeling like there's a misunderstanding. So I also don't want people to take that advice and say, I'm the problem. You might not be the problem.
Well, oh my God, you live long enough that you learn that for sure. And it's not all the circumstances, but there's definitely a lot of circumstances in life where like I don't know. I also I wonder if it's like, sometimes it can be a woman thing. Like we blame ourselves. We try to be introspective to say like, well, maybe I'm not blaming myself, but maybe I'm just like, how can I contribute to fix it? It's like, I have to be, part of the problem. Like maybe I'm not 100% of the problem, but like sometimes it's not you at all.
Sometimes it's not. I mean, I also think like just going back to that example of the but and also, right? I don't think there's an issue with communicating with the word but. I think that's a normal communication style. I would say the issue was more with that person who had a problem with that word. However, right, you're a professional. You have to find a way to work with people in a productive way if you choose to do that. So that's a solution for it. But again, the problem isn't using the word but. The problem is actually that other person who has trouble listening when they hear that word. So I also want to make it clear that like adapting your communication style doesn't necessarily mean that you're the problem. I would actually argue it means that other people maybe need to work on the way that they perceive information or statements.
But you can only control yourself at the end of the day. And if you want to achieve a certain result and you check your ego at the door, it's not like who's right or wrong. But if you're like, all right, well, if I make this little adjustment, I get what I want. And that's the most important thing, then I guess that's the most important thing, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think it also depends, right? Like if you're working in a capacity where the project wins when everybody wins or the team wins together, then yes, sometimes you do check your ego at the door because you have to figure out, how do I work with these people in a functional capacity that achieves the greater goal of launching this new product or whatever it is that you're doing in the workplace that you need to get done. So I do think that there's an element of that too. And again, every scenario is nuanced. This advice and this tip is not for everything all the time, but I do think it's something to consider if you're feeling like you are maybe misunderstood sometimes, is think about ways that maybe why that's happening and listen and observe too.
Well, it certainly is an empowering thought, right? Because like if you're stuck, with somebody, you don't have to be reliant upon them to do something to change it. Like the empowering piece of it is like, I can actually figure out a way through this problem. So that's really freaking empowering. So speaking of like workplace and I don't know, we're talking about like innovation earlier. You and I like either last time we chatted, I think it was the last time we chatted, we were talking a bit about like AI, which I find like so fascinating. I think you're really fascinated by it as well. And I think I wanted to incorporate it into our conversation today because I mean, there's so much to talk about. But I guess my first question about AI, just generally, because we don't talk about it enough on the show. I don't think we talk about it enough in our industry. And so the second you said that you're into it, I'm like, oh my God, we got to talk about this. I'm curious. So, like, from your perspective, as somebody who is more well versed in AI than maybe the average person in our industry, how have you seen AI help our industry thus far? And then conversely, based on what you've seen, what should we all be cautious of?
So many things. So I love AI. I'm super interested in it. I think it is the future. It's the future in a lot of different ways. I would also say for the women listening to this that there are some super interesting studies. And Jesse, I think I shared this with you last time that we chatted. There are super interesting studies that are coming out that are saying that women are adopting AI at a slower pace than compared to their male counterparts, right? That women are more hesitant to use AI. So there were some super interesting studies that came out that women like almost felt like ashamed of using AI or maybe had more hesitancy around AI than their male colleagues. So they felt like, oh, if people know I'm using AI, are they going to think that I am not good at my job because I'm cheating using AI? Whereas some of the men interviewed were like, oh yeah, I'm using AI to get ahead. So I think that's super interesting too, in that there maybe are some other elements there to unpack. I also read some stats that women's jobs are more susceptible than men's jobs to being more obsolete or impacted by AI. So I do think it's important that women start learning about AI as a whole. In terms of our industry, I mean, AI is extremely powerful. So some ways that you could use it are using it to help you write your briefs. One of the things that I've tested is I've put in some information and asked it to like help into ChatGPT and ask me to help write a vignette so I can get creators inspired on like different storylines they can tell. You can use it to help you write a customer profile or customer persona. There's so many things that you can do to help automate your work, save you time. You can also help it to like use it to help scan the internet. So who are 5 creators right now talking about X? If you just want to know what's happening in your industry, can help you pull that info. It's not perfect. I've also noticed like I've asked ChatGPT specific questions about like helping me pull people from TikTok. It's not great at that. But if there's other things out there that you're looking for information, use it for that, especially when it comes to things like research, competitor analysis. Like there's so many things you can use. If you're launching a new product and you need information on how people are using that product, or you want to pull studies, right? Have it help you. I mean, obviously, fact check things that come through, but it's a huge tool that can be super helpful.
Huge.
Yes,
And
huge.
to that point, I experimented with the other day and I thought of you because it was definitely AI. I was in, it must have been Instagram, and I think it was Instagram. And there's like the search bar now has this like blue little circle in it. And I clicked it, and that is the built in AI tool within Instagram. And I was like,
Huh.
interesting. So
Okay.
it's like pulling from Bing, like it says that it's, hold on, we're
Yeah.
calculating and pulling from Bing, which is the same as ChatGPT, I believe, right?
Yeah.
So, because I was like, oh, does they have their own AI? Like, I wonder what I could pull here. But I'll tell you, I was like, what influencers are the most popular on Instagram? And I'm like, I'm asking
Yeah.
like Instagram that. And like, in this category, and I got totally reasonable, like decent answers. Some of the influencers I knew. And so I could validate like immediately. I was like, that is so cool. So to also just see it like become more easily accessible,
Yes.
even within the social platform, like that is freaking cool.
Yes, definitely. I would say it doesn't come without potential downsides or watch out. So I'll share those too. One, Please remember that ChatGPT is public. Do not put any proprietary company information in there, any financial information. Like ChatGPT does have enterprise options. So if your company has like a secure gated enterprise version of that, which some companies do, use that for your work. If you're just a regular user, don't put in any of your personal information. Don't put in, just know that it's public and act appropriately. I would also say, keep in mind, right, that your competitors could be making the same searches as you and getting similar results. So keep that in mind. In terms of safety, I mean, I think there's a lot of things to be aware of, right? I think we've probably all seen some of the new video generation tech that's come out, Midjourney's image generating tech that's come out. That stuff is going to be interesting. I think there's a lot of conversations happening right now around like AI generated art and what's being fed into the model. What is the output? What if it's generating material that was copyrighted? Like there's tons of conversations happening right now around inputs and outputs and copyright infringement and art and like a lot of things. And if you're a creator and you're interested in AI, be mindful of how your content is being used, right? So because I do think that there will be a world in which brands may ask creators to shoot a couple of videos and then they might feed that into an AI model and make an AI generated video of somebody, right? More for like a UGC content piece. When you send that video to that brand, what are they doing with it? Do they have to delete it after a certain time? Like I would continue to ask questions, especially if you think that eventually they might be using it for AI purposes. So there's a lot to be mindful of. Last thing is like, and this one freaks me out personally a little bit, is just online safety as a whole. I would also say like voice tech is getting more advanced. If you're out there on the internet, especially if you're a creator, that stuff is public and people could be using that in negative or malicious ways. They could be taking your image and your video and using it negatively. So just be mindful of that and know that it's out there and be careful.
And I hope that also what comes to light are like qualified, like legal professionals
Yes.
to tell us what to do when the bad thing happens.
Yes.
And like, because the bad things are just going to inevitably happen. I'm never one for like government overreach, but I do think there needs to be more regulations in terms of all this. And I think that it's wild because like, if it's the government who's going to regulate it, because like who else really would? Like you're also relying on those people who are like in their 80s or 70s to like understand AI. And like, that's a tall order, a tall ask. So I don't know. The stat that you shared with me last time and then again today, like blows my mind how like just women are more slowly adopting it. And I really hope that changes because I do totally see all the potential of how it can be such a tool. It can be such a helpful tool.
Yeah.
Fact check it, of course, like all the things that you said and be aware of where it can go awry. But I also don't want to like deter people from leaning into it because like you could have said all the same things about the internet back in 1995.
100%.
You know what I mean? Like, oh, it's a scary place. Like, no way, you can't trust it, blah, blah, blah. But like, if you didn't know, like today, imagine if the person was so scared back then and didn't lean into it and like literally never went online, like where would we be? So I see it as like a very similar thing. So anyways, I love that you're into it. And I hope that you encourage and inspire some of our listeners to check it out and just to be more comfortable with it. It's not scary. It really isn't. Like, it's not really that intimidating. Like, just try it and you'll see, you know?
Just try it. I mean, there's tools that can make presentations for you. Like, there are tools out there that can make presentations. There's tools that can help you automate your emails. There's tools like I heard of a tool the other day that can help you practice your interview skills if you're someone on the job market and you're looking to, practice how you interview. Like there's so many interesting tools out there that can help you be more productive in all kinds of different elements. I've heard of one that I think can like help you with your sales calls, right? Where you practice on video and it like gives you feedback. So anyway, I just think that there's a lot of different tools. It's not just ChatGPT, even though I think that's obviously a great and powerful tool, but there's so many different options out there. And there's also some really cool women innovating in AI as well. So keep an eye out for that.
100%. We've talked about on this podcast before, even there's a tool called Caveat, for example, that
Yes.
reviews your contracts and your agreements. Talk about something that nobody enjoys doing. So let AI be the one to help you with that. Canva, I use the Canva AI tools all the time, talking about visual things. And it makes it so quick and so much easier. And imagine I'll wrap it up with this. One of the most valuable things in this world, in my opinion, is time. And so imagine if you have this tool at your fingertips that can give you so much time back, what that can do both for you personally, professionally, in every aspect of your life, to be able to either be choosing different things where you want to invest your time, or just having, oh my God, I have time back.
Yeah.
It's a huge improvement in life in general. So anyways, we're the biggest cheerleaders for it. So I wanted to bring it up today and hope that people are at least open to the idea. I could absolutely continue chatting with you for a whole other hour, but I probably should get you back to work. So my last question to you is if our listeners want to reach out, want to learn more about you, or just connect with you, learn more about the tech company you work for now, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
Yes. Find me on LinkedIn or through WIM. I'm obviously on the WIM Slack channel. Those are probably the two best ways. And then I would also say for creators out there, this is just a PSA, always be kind to people on the brand side. I wanted to say this earlier, but this is my parting thought, is always be kind to people on the brand side. And if a deal doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, but be kind and be respectful, because let me tell you one thing, creators, I think, forget that people don't work with that same brand forever. So maybe they don't work with this brand that you like right now, but next year they could be working somewhere else, or same thing on the agency. Maybe you don't like the brand that they just brought you now, but they may have a client that you love, right? In 6 months from now. And if you were rude, inappropriate, not super professional in your communications, I remember the creators who have said inappropriate things to me from 7 years ago. I remember all of you. And I also remember flip side, right? I mentioned Cara, who's amazing and lovely and so kind. And I remember the ones who are kind and respectful and act with integrity and are super honest. I also remember those folks too. And I think that goes for a lot of people in the industry. That goes for agents overall. I would just encourage everybody to be kind, be respectful to one another, and know that we're all, working with our best interests, the best interest of the industry at heart, and trying to work together to do our best work.
Because Steph is not going to forget.
I just had to throw that out there. If you're mean to somebody on the brand side, they will remember. I promise you, we remember if you're mean.
They will. And then they'll end up a couple years later at the dream brand that you've always wanted to partner with. And you'll never be able to work with that brand again because you were mean to them.
You never know.
And
but if
you
you're
never
nice,
know, the crazier things have happened. And why weren't you just kind? You could have just been professional at the very least. And you could have just been kind. You get met with kindness back usually when you give it. So hot take there. It's always so nice talking to you. So I appreciate you coming today. Definitely follow up with Steph. She's a wealth of information. I've known you since your style hall days. So I've seen you through, I remember getting, it was lunch or breakfast or something with you in LA years ago. And anyway, Steph is great people. She's on the West Coast, bouncing back between SF and LA. And she's also a mentor with us. So if you're a VIP member, you can have a one-on-one hour-long session together with her, pick her brain. And thank you for coming on today. I appreciate you.
Thank you for having me, Jessie. It's so fun. I'm glad we're finally doing this.
Same. And thank you guys for listening. We appreciate you so much. And we will see you next week. Bye, guys. If you enjoyed this episode, we gotta have you back. Check out our website for more ways to get involved, including all the information you need about joining our collective. You can check out all the information at iamwim.com. Leave us a review, a rating, but the most important thing that we can ask you to do is to share this podcast.
Thanks for listening.
Tune in next week.